Well, welcome everyone. Good morning, afternoon, and evening. We're so glad you're here. For recording purposes, um, just to introduce myself, I'm Jan Jeremias, and for over 35 years, I have been involved in some way with the health of people. For the last 20, I've taken my background in science and clinical research and my passion for holistic wellness, combined those two together to support people and their pets towards health and longevity. And one of my greatest joys and passions has been the exploration of creativity and connection to our well-being. Joining forces with my collaborator and now dearest of friends, Mary Jane McQueen, we have a joint mission to bring kindness to the world, one creative project, one breath, and one conversation at a time. So, thank you, Mary Jane, for being on this journey with me, and a huge thank you to all of you for being here today. This community would not be what it is, and these conversations would not be possible if it were not for all of you. Mary Jane, I will pass it to you, my friend.
Thank you, Jan, for that lovely introduction. And yeah, so yes, as Jan mentioned, for recruiting purposes, I am Mary Jane, and or MJ, as I'm known in some social circles for sure. Um, I have my own creative studio, and I really love supporting my fellow entrepreneurs on their journey to get their mission and vision seen in a way that feels authentic to them. And I I hate to say this, like I've been doing this for graphic design for over 35 years, so that's pretty crazy to me when I think about that. But I just really love supporting people on their mission and vision, and of course this beautiful collaboration with Jan as well. Because it's true, the underlying mission to everything that I do, and I know Jan is in this way too, is kindness, empathy, and compassion, and starting with kindness to self first, and then radiating empathy and compassion out into the world. So that's my mission for everything that I do, and I'm honored as always to be here with all of you as well. And thank you for being here and helping us to create this beautiful community where we can definitely feel that we're safe to share our views and our feelings and our thoughts and share those also with the world. So thank you so much for that. And should I begin, Jan, with the poem?
Yes, please.
All right. Appropriately named Seesaw. And the writer is Nicole Roundtree. Have you ever been on a seesaw? It's kind of like life, you know? It goes up and down, depending on the weight on the other end. You may be at your highest point, living and loving life, screaming out in elation. Oh, what joy you have, high in the sky and on the high end of that seesaw. Then it happens, that heavy burden that weighs you down, bringing you down, 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 down. Sometimes so close to the bottom that you're forced to get on your knees for support, causing you to lift your head and arms up to the sky and yell, God, help me. Please release this weight that is bearing down on my soul. Then, after what may have seemed like an eternity, the other person at the end of the seesaw jumps off, thrusting you up and forward, reminding you that the weight that bears you down is only temporary, like the motions of a seesaw.
Thank you, Mary Jane. So, welcome, dear friends, once again. Welcome to this space. We welcome you with open hearts and deep gratitude. Life has a way of placing us on a seesaw. rocking us back and forth or up and down between moments of profound stillness and the turbulence of storms. At times, it can feel like we are carried to the heights of joy, laughter, and radiant peace, only to be swiftly pulled into the intensity of chaos, grief, or overwhelm. The truth is, this seesaw is part of our human experience. On one end, we find the comfort of stillness, clarity, peace, and a sense of grounding. And on the other, we meet the rawness of storm, emotions that feel unpredictable, consuming, and sometimes beyond what we think we can hold. What if, though, the seesaw isn't about choosing one end or wishing we could stay in stillness forever? What if the gift lies in learning how to hold the extremes? Perhaps the balance point, the place of equanimity. The place of equanimity is not about erasing the highs or the lows, but about allowing ourselves to fully feel them without losing the thread of who we are at the center. Maybe equanimity is found in remembering that we are vast enough to contain both the soaring joy and the crashing waves, that even when we feel thrown from one end of the seesaw to the other, there is within us a steady axis, a center that doesn't disappear even when we forget it's there. This morning, as we gather in conversation and reflection, we will honor both stillness and storm. We'll explore what it means to live within these extremes, to notice what they teach us, and to allow them to shape us into more compassionate, resilient, and authentic versions of ourselves. This is a space to feel, to breathe, to remember, and together we'll open to the wisdom of in our joys, the lessons in our storms, and the strength of that balance point where equanimity lives. We're so grateful that you're here, ready to share this journey with us.
It's interesting. Thank you, Darlene, for giving us some inspiration last week because you fully summarized in a visual sense for Jan and I when we were talking about the conversation this week. And it really, the image definitely resonated. And were like, yep, that seems like a good thing to explore because I'm sure we all feel that at times and don't always know the whys, of course, and we don't necessarily need to know, but just to know that we're not alone in that in that feeling.
Absolutely. And I love the image, but I love this idea also in that like we're not trying to live in stillness. You know, seesaw is it's really at the center. We're trying to hold both. And I love that idea because I think that in the process of our inner work, sometimes we think we're supposed to or feel like we're supposed to get rid of something that we don't want, but really it's not about that. It's learning how to navigate it um, more. I don't know. I like to use the word grace, maybe with more grace, and learning how to hold both at once. And I think that was huge for me is to realize you could hold both. Mary Jane, did you want to share anything else before I pass it to Zara?
Yeah, I love that perspective. I don't know. It reminded me when you were saying the holding both. I remember being a little girl on a seesaw and um, trying to balance. Usually, it was with my nephew who was the same age as me, like 6 weeks older, and his sister, and oftentimes because he was a bit heavier than us, even though he wasn't that big, we'd have two of us on one end and him on the other, trying to balance out the seesaw so that it would stay on that even thing, but inevitably one little wiggle, one little adjustment, and somebody would come crashing down. So the visual for that just came into my head. I hadn't thought of it in years. So there you go. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kimberly. You said you have fond memories. I also do of almost letting yourself drop down, like so your feet lifted and you kind of bounced at the bottom. The person who was at the top kind of bounced too. And, but
Yes.
really, and this whole idea of also play, like the play of it all, um, and how quickly things can change, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
All of it.
All of it, all of it, all at once. So
Zara, please.
Thank you. First of all, I love that poem and the whole analogy around, like life's a play and we're just trying to just balance ourselves continuously when stuff just happens to us, I think is was the initial thought I had. And then I thought, is this going back to our boundaries again? As we talk about resilience and being able to hold that space, the grace, and so when it comes to boundaries and that line that you were thinking, the middle bit, like trying to keep that, I'm just wondering if that's the focus that we have in things like we want for ourselves, things that we want for our profession, or say like you have something like a passion project or something that you're trying to get to. Like it's that balance between that too. Like, how do we keep that focus? Which brings me down to like it's that whole, I think, self-respect as to like, am I going to put myself first? Am I going to put others first? Am I going to put, this job before my family, for instance? And then is that when we fall down on the seesaw? So is it really about the choices we make? So those were my thoughts. So thank you for allowing me to share.
Oh, thank you, Zara. I love that about the choices we make. And I think at different times we make different choices. And I think when you have certain things, and this reminds me of something that I've been part of over the past number of weeks, a program, and we were talking about values and shifting of values and how, sometimes our values like are almost in opposition to each other. We want success, we want a career, we want to feel fulfilled, we have like a purpose or a passion, and yet we also value our families. And so, or ones we love or something else. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like, what do you do when you almost feel like those two values are conflicting? Like your boss comes in and has a deadline for you, and you were supposed to get home to go take your kids somewhere, and I think we have those, and those could be choices and that we have to make, and not necessarily circumstances that tend to happen to us, not something like, okay, you're at this high and all of a sudden you lose somebody, um or something like that, which obviously that's part of the seesaw too. But I think I love what you shared about choices, because I think sometimes that's how it feels, right? It's the choices, and how do we balance both? And I think that's, different for each of us, and we have to figure out the best way to do that for each of us, depending on, whether it be asking a friend or really sitting, with whatever's happening, or communication with others, and, letting them in on what your decision is and why, trying to, navigate or find some sort of equanimity or middle road. Mary Jane, did you have something you wanted to share?
yeah, it was just when he said the middle road, he reminded me of the conversation we had several months back now about the middle way. So
Uh-huh. Yep.
it all ties together. It's amazing how as much as we think that it's individual threads, back to the weaving again, um,
Yeah.
how it all sort of weaves together. But yeah, I like what Sarah was saying about the idea of boundaries. And it's true. It is about the making decisions. Sometimes the decisions are made for us, just because of circumstances. But yeah, it's making those decisions and having those things. And I like, Jen, how you were saying about the the boss at the last minute giving you, um, not that I ever experienced that in corporate, but ha ha ha. Um, but yes, it's the boundaries and realizing that the highs and the lows, sometimes come at exactly simultaneously.
And it could be those inner deadlines, like
Yes.
all of us here being entrepreneurs, it's those deadlines that we actually impose upon ourselves. And then all of a sudden we have conflicting things like that. We were like, do I do this? Like I was supposed to see a friend or
Hmm.
whatever, or do I do that? And some of it is acknowledgement and ownership of whatever you do, like I said.
Hmm.
Like I reached out to a friend who had reached out like a few days ago, and it was the Jewish holiday, and things, my week has like been kind of crazy because of a limited work schedule and everything. And I wrote
I
this
can
text.
relate.
Yeah, so I wrote this text this morning apologizing that I hadn't reached out sooner, but why I hadn't reached out. And that's where I think, grace on the other person's behalf and an understanding goes a long way.
Yes.
But boundaries, was really interesting, and I want to hear what Zara has to say, and then Kimberly. But boundaries are really interesting because, I went to serve, attended online services, and the rabbi was talking about, being in conflict with someone. Sometimes you have to soften those boundaries. Like there's no way, I mean, if you hold, like if you're trying to reconcile or to communicate with someone else, it's almost like that boundary has to have a little give because otherwise you're not open to anything if you have too strict a boundary. And then there's no grace and no, almost like it has to be porous to some extent. Because otherwise, and if you think about something that's porous that has little holes, like so there's space or breath that can come in and out, but also there's still that boundary. It's not like it's rigid where there's nothing that can communicate from either side. And she was talking about how boundaries almost need to soften in regard to certain, like, many different situations that a lot of us hold are almost too rigid.
That's that's so true. I love that, right? I mean, it's that saying about, I mean, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And I know that that's an older saying, but at the same time, it's like I like to maybe twist that a little bit and say, extend the grace to others that you would like them to extend to you,
Mm,
so that you find that middle ground, the middle way, right? The that gentle releasing of boundaries doesn't mean you have to change your full opinion of things, but it's just allowing that space, as you were mentioning, for the grace to come in.
absolutely. So, Zara, please.
Thank you. Thank you. So, I have two thoughts. I'm hoping not to take too long on it because I understand Kimberly also has a hand up here. So, when it comes to boundaries, and we talked about sometimes people make that decision for us. I mean, yeah, sometimes people just pass away. We can't make them stay. But there are other times I believe in our life that like we can outsource our opinion to others. Like we're like, oh, I can't. I better like meet this deadline because I've promised this person and like I need to keep my word, right? But what if, like you say, we're softer even with ourselves and go, well, actually, what if I drop them a message and say, listen, something's come up. I can't quite make it. Like, is this thing urgent or like, do I have a bit of leeway? Right. Just even giving ourselves that grace to start with before we give it to others. So it's that whole, well, if I'm allowed to introduce well, it's a little bit of a technical term. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. We call it contrastive thinking, which means, can I be wrong about this situation? Like, does it have to be like this? So talking about that exchange we have with someone else, even, and that pushing boundary, I think has kind of come into it. Whereas, like, how can I handle this conversation respectfully and see if I'm wrong, right? And I believe that's how we end up growing together. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you, Zara. And first of all, yes, I agree that sometimes it's also allowing ourselves that same grace. I mean, I know all of you, I would say fairly well by this point. Um, and I mean, maybe if I'm wrong, whatever, but I think that when, you know, generally, I mean, the people that I feel like I'm surrounded by are people that hold themselves to pretty high standards. And I think sometimes we forget to allow ourselves that little bit of grace and to allow ourselves to be able to, you know, to be human, right? And we forget that we have to put, we have to create those kind of soften our expectations of ourselves in some ways. And it's not like it's like I was reading something the other day and they were talking about like whether, you don't do something and you say, oh my gosh, I'm so lazy. And maybe you could reframe that to like, oh, it was something else besides for labeling it something that really does not have a positive connotation at all. And also like kind of labeling yourself as that. And so I love that idea of allowing ourselves some grace. And Kimberly, please.
Good morning. Um, I love the words that you were sharing in regards to, first of all, I have to say that I love the reading Mary Jane, and then um I love the words that you used, Jan. Gift lies in holding the extremes. I mean, I don't know. Those words just I really have a deep appreciation for those words. And then I had this this thought, you know, and asking myself this deeper question, are we really holding extremes? Are we holding them? You know, is it something that we need to hold? For me, I feel like it's an invitation. Like when you were talking earlier in regards to purpose or vision or and we're on a path, whatever it might be, and then it's like, okay, we're on this path, and then this experience comes, and you were talking a little bit about core values, and then it feels as if you're off of the path, but you're on the path. I think it's part of the path for me. That's my experience. It's part of the path because for me, the my higher power is saying there's something here that you need to explore, right? That experience doesn't just show up because it's not random. It's showing up because, and it's not a deterrent. It's showing up because there's something out of that experience that you need to learn about yourself, learn about your path more deeply. There's something that you need to maybe explore within yourself so you can prune and let go. Uh, Maybe it's to sharpen the awareness, right? Maybe it's to make things more clear because clarity is so important when we're walking on our path. So for me, I think that, again, thanks so much for those beautiful words. Gift lies in holding the extremes because it led me to that question that I was asking myself, right? Because I had this image of, holding these two experiences in my hands. And then my arms began to become heavy. And I'm thinking, wait, there's nothing heavy about it, right? Because it's for me. It's for me. And then I love the conversation that we're having around boundaries. And I love what Darlene said when she says, a boundary is not meant to be a wall. I couldn't agree more. Uh, when I think of my earlier life experience, Darlene, I I remember my earlier, life experiences in my teens and 20s, those boundaries were walls. They were walls. Uh, but as I began, and someone used the word soften, and I love that, as I began to know myself a little bit better, it became softer. It became, something that I could play with. Because I think because boundaries are for us, right? When they're coming from our healed person, right? Our healed self, there tends to be more clarity in that. So thanks so much for the invitation and thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'm so glad you're here, and everybody. One of the things that I was thinking about as you were sharing is this idea of holding. And I think that we have to remember we can hold something and we don't need to cling to it. And we can remember that we can let go. So it's not something like we hold and we all of a sudden we take on and it becomes, like who we are. There's this idea of like, I can hold something and then I can put it down, or I can place it to the side and I can take in what I've taken in and absorb what I've been meant to absorb. And I think I came to the idea of holding, being able to hold two things at once was when I lost my dad. And being able, like, so there I was, in deep, obvious, not obviously, but I was in deep sadness and deep, feelings of deep grief and loss. But I also could hold other things at the same time. And I think it was one of the first times in my, sort of like in my, let's say, in my awareness that I was aware of being able to hold all of that and then experience and hold other things. And I think that that was so like that's like to me it was almost remarkable, like it was miraculous to me that I had always thought that either I was living in one extreme or another. I was going to live, I was in, oh my gosh, I was engulfed in this loss and there was no glimmer of anything else. And then being able to experience both and not be scared that I was experiencing both. And then the opposite would happen where I would like have a memory and it would be like, it would make me laugh. It was hysterical about him or something. But then it would also bring deep sadness to my eyes, deep tears. And it was the ability to be able to like experience both of those at the same time. And I think that that's what life is our ability to be a container for it all. And it's not like we're trying to, I think a lot of suffering, and me, I can be guilty, I'm guilty of this, is thinking that I want to keep myself in those highs. Like I'm going to live so that I'm always in that high point. And I don't think, that's just not the way life is. I think that it's not, it almost creates more problems trying to, because I think what happens is we escape the negative. Like it's like we're in pursuit, not pursuit of this. Like I want to be in the highs of my life all the time. And, you know, I think it puts a lot of stress and a lot of undue angst in our lives, to be honest, to get attached to that attachment. Seamus, or well, somebody else if they want to share and then Seamus. I just
No, I love that. Yeah, I love that perspective, Jen. It is amazing as human beings how we have this ability. Well, some people don't, but if we allow ourselves the blessing that it is to be able to hold those things both at once. And I know what you mean with and letting go of that expectation that we think people expect us to behave in a certain way, especially when it comes to things like grief. Whether you're grieving a person or a situation or a job or whatever it is. I mean, whatever brings you grief, because all of those things, of course, can. Um, it's just beautiful to be able to see that, to release the expectations that people are we think people are expecting from us, and just really experiencing what it's like to be a human being, and to allow those emotions to happen simultaneously. Because yeah, it's true. I like how you're sharing what your dad. I mean, I have a number of situations, when we talk about, I mean, you know, um, well, I mean, I've lost both of my parents as well, so there's definitely stories there. But that's one thing with when my father-in-law was in hospice. So that was one of the things he said, for us. He wanted us to remember the laughter we shared together. And so he said he didn't want his funeral just to be a somber affair. He wanted people to remember the laughter. And so it's such a interesting human experience to be able to experience the laughter in the midst of grief. And that's exactly what we did. That's how we honored him.
I love that, Mary Jane. I was actually reminded of a really sweet story about my dad the other day. Being the Jewish holidays, I'm with a lot of family, and when my father was in hospice at the end, at home, he was on his porch in a hospital bed, and they had two ceiling fans. And my father was an aerospace engineer, so he built airplane engines. And he looks up at me and he says to me, "Oh my gosh, look at those propellers." And I just cracked up, because that's what they did. I mean, they did look like, he worked on jets. So
Well,
it was just
especially from the perspective of a hospital bed. Trust me, I
That's right.
understand.
Exactly. Exactly. And I just like cracked up. And I thought to myself, that was like so much who he was. And that just like was revealed in the sadness of him. Like, he was, I mean, I think he died a few days later, but still, he was who he was till the very end. It was beautiful.
Jan, that reminds me when my grandfather was transitioning. It was almost like he was taking us to the earlier places in our life. So my uncle, there was two different experiences. My uncle walked in the room and he said, "Oh no, hi, Doc, there comes a dirty German." It was so interesting. And then another experience was because he was in the war, if you couldn't guess from that statement. And then he was sitting on, like, perched on a dock, and he was fishing with the stick. So he says to me, he goes, because at that time I was no longer his granddaughter. He said, I had transitioned to someone else along this journey, but he said, "Give me a stick, hurry, hurry, the fish are jumping. I need to get the fish." So it was really interesting because he was in that experience for over 2 weeks. And he was taking us through different parts of his life experience. And yeah, it was something. So when you were sharing that, you know, uh, yeah, thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for sharing, Kimberly. Seamus, you've been so patiently waiting.
Yeah, no problem. No, beautiful stories. Like, it's really, really like I'm listening carefully, like to experiences, and it kind of comes back, I guess, to some key words that came up for me were like choice, boundaries, and intentions. And going back to the seesaw, I was kind of, thinking about what you had shared as well, Jan, about, holding on to one thing or another, and a lot of discomfort around, the highs and the lows, and but I think it was a lovely point, like around what Zara was talking about choice. It was a nice point to bring in around that we get to choose. What we value, like, and to see, it goes back to what Kimberly was saying as well. Like, every experience is a learning experience, like the highs and the lows, and we learn equally from both, as I guess. And there's maybe a happy emotion that comes with the highs and the joy, and a deep grief maybe that comes, like just what we're speaking about, when close ones are in transition, a deep grief. But there's still a highly valuable experience in everything we experience. And an opportunity to grow and learn and to engage and to figure out, the bigger picture of life and what's about through experiencing the highs and the lows and the whole variety of everything. And that was just coming to mind out of just what's been shared. But what I was thinking about as well was when it comes back to intention, I was thinking like at the very when we were listening to the poem, the beautiful poem at the beginning, and and Zara was sharing about intentions. The idea of why intentions came to mind was that the choices we make um, can impact others, or we can be impacted by others and other people's choices. So, for example, if on the other side of the seesaw they decide to jump off, we're left in a heap on the floor. Or if we decide to jump off, or if we decide to change the pattern of what we're doing, what is their intention? Is their intention to kind of bring joy to the other side, or is it actually to hurt? So I think there's a great lesson around choices we make and the intentions behind our choices in the simple metaphor of the seesaw about, do we want to bring more joy to the other person in the choices we make about jumping on or jumping off, or changing the rhythm of the seesaw. And likewise, other people have that choice to make as well. And I think there's an invitation for us to kind of allow ourselves to let go of blame. And kind of that idea of blame comes to mind as well. So we could blame other people when they've jumped off the seesaw and kind of get very bitter or whatever. But then I think that's the invitation to allow ourselves to be at ease with whatever choice they make and wherever their intention, that's theirs, and it's not our burden to carry. So I think there's kind of a little life lesson in there as well around when we are impacted by other people's actions. That's their burden rather than ours. So that's kind of some of the stuff that was coming up for me through the whole metaphor of the seesaw. And thanks again, John and MJ, for everything and everyone here who's kind of triggered these thoughts.
Thank you, Seamus. Love that. And I had a similar thought come through, and I'm so glad that you brought it to our attention further. Was this idea of like when someone jumps off or someone does some sort of severe action at the top, which either causes you to get really or threatens you, and how you react. And I think it brings to mind a few other things, like this feel of like how we react initially. So when we react initially, it might be holding on for dear life because we don't want to get hurt, So it might be that so jarring on the seesaw that you don't want to fall and get hurt. And so you kind of have to, you know, brace yourself. And if you think of like the whole thing that happens when you're on a seesaw, but then yet again is, what is the more I don't know, the more expansive reaction that you have. Like, do you just, do you get through that kind of survival part? And then what do you do afterwards? And how do you interact go forward? So I love that because I think, right, we all have those circumstances where all of a sudden we figure out and we know that things happen every day, which kind of like we are surrounded by, and we do have a choice. And then we also have a choice within ourselves of how, like, even when the way we speak to ourselves and, the language we use to ourselves and whether we set up those boundaries. So we have all these choices that we make every day. Um, and how do we make those choices? Do we make them with awareness or are we unconscious? So, Darlene, you had your hand up, please.
You just took the words out of my mouth, Jan. Everything you just shared. I, as you're talking, I'm like, yeah, that's where I was going. I had just a powerful vision right now of me being 10 years old on the seesaw, and I thought, oh my gosh, what a contrast to life now, right? Those moments where you are at the top of the seesaw, right? Somebody else is pushing down and you're at the top. And how you can either experience that top, so similar to what you're saying, Jan, how you can experience being at the top, it being a euphoric feeling, right? When your legs are really limber and you almost help that jump off point, that leap. You leap, you want to go higher and you want to stay at the top. Or is it sometimes you get to the top because somebody else has pushed you up to the top, and it's that moment of fear, that moment of, oh my goodness, I don't want to be here. So I love what you just said there, Jan, about expansion, right? Is it an expansive feeling or is it a fearful feeling? And what happens when you're at that top? There's that pause, that pivotal pause at the top where you're like, ooh, do I like this? Or does this not feel good? And how can we be in that pivotal pause for a moment or two and then be pliable so that when we come back down, and Seamus, I love what you just said too, when we come back down, do we have that flexibility and that softness in our legs to be able to support when we come down, so it's a bit of a softer landing, it's a little bit of a gentler landing, no matter how hard the person on the other side decides to, pull you down or shoot you up. And I remember, being on a seesaw with a couple people are in my head from childhood where, it was a really fun thing when you could be the person that was pushing down and you'd give them that jolt where they, really come down, and it makes you at the top kind of just jump. And what a great way to look at life, right? Sometimes we jump, but that doesn't mean we have to fall. We just hold on and we glide into that moment and choose what that landing feels like. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Darlene. I love that. So we choose the landing. Um, Beautiful. And I also think it shows us a lot about our comfort levels. Like, when we reach those highs, do we feel uncomfortable? Why do we feel uncomfortable? Do we feel like we don't have the right to be in those highs? Do we feel like, in some way we're supposed to like downplay, come like Marianne Williamson, where, we're supposed to downplay, the places in our lives we excel and we expand? Or do we feel like, you know, that's okay that we have, everybody has their highs and lows, and it's okay that you're in this high? I think that sometimes we almost try to escape those highs. They're too uncomfortable in either direction, like in either place. Either we're too much in the, you know, too much in the, like we try to escape the lows because human instinct is to escape that which is uncomfortable on either spectrum, on either end. And so that's one of the things that came to mind. But I do love the idea of a soft landing. And I think, Austin, did you have your hand raised? Or am I mistaken?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So we'll go. I don't know if Austin was next, but we'll go to him.
Never mind, you guys. I'm sorry.
No, feel either way. It's all good. So Al.
Yeah, I got a acronym this week for Seesaw.
Oh, okay.
So, okay, C as in you're having a rough sea, so the storms come out. So it will be SEE for storm elopement, embracement. So it's basically when we have storms, it's like stormy when we are at the top. So we just try to elope from it, try to get out of the storm because it's very rough. And instead of fighting the weather, we have to sometimes have to accept that the nature is in control and we choose to go with the flow. So we have to get prepared, like getting the ponchos in, getting the umbrellas, getting the jackets, getting things. So be prepared for the challenge. So we have to embrace it accordingly. Before, and when it comes to on the other side, where the lake is in stillness. So the saw is actually when we are at the low end, when it's a stillness above waters. So there's a perfect calmness there. So before after the chaotic moment will come to the calmness state. So it's totally we can see in the lake or in the river or wherever, or even in the ocean, it's pure calmness. That means when you throw a small rock across the ocean or the sea, then you can see the ripple effect, going through. just bouncing down you can see the ripples slowly forming. So eventually, it's good that in our life we always have the seesaw effect, So it's up and down. So it's a roller coaster. So it's how we embrace it at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Al. As always, please drop the acronym in the chat for everybody. Um, and I do think it is like the sea, right? It's riding the waves. Zara.
Yeah, thank you. So, going back to boundaries, becoming more resilient, being able to hold almost, I guess, duality, those feelings that just pop up, like when we're trying to get over and experience something like grief. I've got a particular situation going on right now, with somebody who I don't say intentionally is trying to cross boundaries. They've just been through a really tricky time, and I believe they need to be heard. So I created the space for people to share, but it's like it's so overwhelming for almost anybody else. I was just wondering, how would you go about, having that person, not feel like excluded, but at the same time, like help them, right? Without overwhelming everyone else. And I was wondering, that soft landing we're talking about, I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to look for. So I don't know, has anybody got any ideas?
Can you give a little bit more detail?
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, I've got a group of guys joining. Okay. Initially, they were all DMing me like on a constant basis. So I thought, okay, they want to talk to me, they want to tell me something. And some of it was almost like a daily basis. Okay. So I started opening up space as a one-to-one. Then I discovered when a guy shares something with you for the first time, if they like you, they grow an attraction to you. So I'm a married woman. So I thought, okay, that's dangerous. So I opened up this group, I introduced them to each other. We did a few trial sessions, and everyone was happy to share until this guy pops up and starts telling us this really dark story. Like it's really heavy, um, Kimberly, to the point like I can see, when I watch because I record it, I start it, I give up control, and then I leave the session, I leave them to it, and then I come back and ask for feedback. That's what's been going on. But this particular person can either take over the entire session, right? Because he just wants to get this thing off his chest and he's really stuck with it. Or it gets to the point where other people almost say, okay, no, we need to have all these boundaries in place. So it's like it's that yo-yo, the seesaw you're talking about. And we ran a session, there was a happy medium, but now he's like, well, I'm not being heard. Does that give you a bit of more detail, Kimberly?
I think that for me, when I hear the information that you've shared, it sounds like this gentleman may need something more than what your group provides. Because everyone has a different style, but I hear what you're saying because I've led several different groups and spaces and heard some very interesting things over the years. But it almost requires almost like a reset for not rules. I think that word doesn't resonate with me. Maybe guidelines for the space.
Yeah, we put guidelines in place, and everyone was much happier. It was much smoother, and all the feedback I had was like, "Yep, this is a great space to be in. I want to invite my friends now." However, I am aware, so when we said to this person, do you, we kind of opened up the second part of the session that if anyone now wants to add a little bit more to it, the feedback we got was, well, just pray for me. And that just broke my heart. I thought, no, this person does need more. And I believe it's possibly going to be one-to-ones, but it can't be with me. Do you see what I'm saying? See, I could open up space for him, but I don't want him to tell me all that and then like start growing an attraction to me. This is when I'm aware of the effect, because ultimately, like, that would be really painful for him, and I don't think that would be, serving him. So until the guys become more resilient, I don't think I can particularly help him. So I'm just like, how do I find someone who wants to give up a bit of their time to hear a story? My husband can, but then like not all the time, if that makes sense. And I think he's going to need a lot of one-to-ones, to get this story.
Yeah, it reminds me also, when we're holding and curating these spaces to have resources, where you can refer the person, but you don't have to do it like, you don't have to necessarily do it like speaking directly to him, but you can also include that in your guidelines. If you're in a space where you're feeling like things are incredibly um, big for you right now, or you're having experiencing some big feelings, I do have resources available to you, so you can actually peel back those layers in a more intimate setting, in a safe space. Because then again, you're not speaking directly to one person in particular. You're just speaking just broadly to the group. So no one feels kind of like you're speaking directly to them, but you're speaking, because again, there are those things like we were talking about today, with the seesaw, that do come up, and depending on our awareness and our consciousness level, we may not necessarily be in a space to hold them, or we haven't really developed the skill set yet in terms of our emotions to know what to do with them and how to skillfully shift our energy, because it is a skill, and it definitely is a skill. So hopefully that might be of help to you. But I definitely know from being and facilitating a lot of groups settings that these things do come up. They do come up, and it's important to be mindful of them, and how you can be of help and assistance to people without making them feel like you're talking, like I said, directly to them.
Yeah, and I think when we said, okay, when he came to the conclusion that was the case, he goes, just pray for me. However, I do see the need, and I'm like, how we're going to fulfill it. So thank you, Kimberly, for giving me feedback, and Jan, allowing me to share that with you guys as an example of the kind of things that can come up when you have something like a passion project, and you want people to start to know each other, and help each other out. Really was the intention of that meeting, and grow, like swap services. However, like, we encountered an individual who I think needs maybe special treatment, and like, how we gonna, I guess these things get discovered. So thank you again for letting me share that with you guys, and the feedback. I
Um,
appreciate.
you're welcome, Zara, and thank you, Kimberly. That was wonderful. It was really, I think, very useful and very um, and great suggestions. And I think as moderators, there is this ability to kind of portray it as a moderator. It's not something you can do just to keep the integrity of the group and sort of like and the integrity of your role within the group or this creation, and then to Mary Jane put it so beautifully um, in the comments, and to refer out to someone who's a professional or somebody who's a really strong resource for what the person needs. So thank you both. Um, Mary Jane, did you want to share anything, or do we want to move into the meditation? And
I think it would be a good time frame to move into the meditation. Feels like the right space.
okay, begin by settling into a comfortable position. Settling in. Allow your body to rest, your feet to ground, your hands to rest. Close your eyes if that feels safe, and take a deep, nourishing breath in. And as you inhale, feel the air filling your body, expanding your chest, your belly. As you exhale, release any tension, any holding, tightness. With each breath, allow yourself to arrive fully into this moment. Now bring to mind the image of a seesaw. One end holds stillness, calm, and clarity. The other end rises into the storm, carrying emotions in their full intensity. From the soaring heights of joy, exhilaration, and bliss to the deep currents of fear, grief, or anger. Feel how your inner world at times has moved between these extremes, rocking and tilting like a seesaw, sometimes gently, sometimes with sudden force. Allow yourself to notice these movements without judgment, simply acknowledging the full range of what you have experienced. Allow yourself to feel the sensations in your body as you move between these ends. Where do you feel joy and happiness? Where do you feel tension or fear or restlessness? Simply notice without judgment, allowing each sensation to exist exactly as it is. Now bring your attention to the center of the seesaw, the point of balance, the place of equanimity. This is not a place without emotion. It's not a place of numbness. Rather, it's the part of you that can hold the extremes. It is steady, resilient, and wise. Visualize the center as a supportive space within you, a place where both stillness and storm can coexist. With each inhale, imagine drawing the energy of the storm into your awareness without being swept away. With each exhale, feel yourself returning to the calm, to the grounding of the center. Breathe in the intensity. Breathe out into the serenity. Feel how your body, your mind, and your heart can contain both. Reflect gently on this, that equanimity is not the absence of extremes, but the capacity to hold them. The seesaw of life will always rock. The storms will come and the stillness will return. And yet, within you, there is a center that remains, that's that witnesses, that balances it all. Bring your attention once more to your breath. Notice how the inhale and the exhale create a rhythm, a flow, a natural movement between extremes. Allow yourself to rest in the knowledge that you are capable of holding life's storms and joys with compassion courage, presence, and awareness. As you prepare to leave this practice, carry with you the awareness of your inner seesaw, the wisdom of the center, and the gentle reminder that you are whole exactly as you are, storm, stillness, and the balance in between. When you're ready, gently bring your attention back to your body, to the room or space that you're in, to this present moment. Wiggle your fingers and toes. Stretch softly if you choose, and open your eyes. Mary Jane, did you want to share?
Did you want me to share now?
Yeah, perfect.
So we were having a dilemma this week when we were talking about the thing, and we actually found two poems, and so this two short poems actually. And so this seemed to be an appropriate one to kind of finish off just before our final closing. It is also called The Seesaw, and it's by Matt Gottlieb. It says, there's a seesaw that goes up and down. It can take you to the moon and also make you drown. You try to hang on, stay up in the air, but the seesaw has its rules. It doesn't seem fair. So you sit with your feet on the ground, praying for it to pass, and just as you begin to lose hope, the seesaw moves at last. And once again, you're up in the air, flying higher and higher, believing he has finally listened and delivered your heart's desire. And in your happiness, you forget you were never meant to fly. That's when the seesaw drops, pulling you down from the sky. And as you lie on the ground, wishing for the days when you were flying high, you look up to the heavens one last time before you say goodbye.
Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for that great poem once again, Mary Jane. Yes, on our great dilemma. Um, thank you all for being here. We appreciate each and every one of you and your shares and your contributions. And we have two things coming up. We have an online version of our retreat happening, women's retreat happening on October 18th. Mary Jane, myself, and Darlene. So that's really exciting. Um, Feel free to attend, share it if you like. We'd appreciate that. Mary Jane and I then the following Saturday, which is the 25th, have an online workshop for Spirit-Born Imaginings. So that's happening on the 25th. So October's a busy month for us, but we
Yep.
will be here each Friday and look forward to seeing you all again very soon or hearing you all very soon. But you know what I mean.
Yes, for sure. Thank you all for being here and helping us to create this beautiful space, this beautiful community.
And before we go, I just realized that I just got the link and I haven't even shared it with Seamus yet. But Seamus was on my podcast with Bill Carell this week, lighting the candle world that works, talking about our book. And so I'm popping the link in the chat. And so if you want to listen or
Can you
share,
can you send that to I'm having tech issues and I can't go into chat and some other things. Could you send that to me separate, please?
sure, absolutely. We'll be posting it anyway, but I'll just gladly send it to you via Messenger. Austin, thanks. But it's there if anybody wants to listen to our great conversation with Seamus.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.